Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 19.1 launch week and our second webinar, What's New in ASP.NET Web Forms, MVC, .NET Core Controls, and Bootstrap, presented by DevExpress Web Program Manager Mehul and DevExpress Technical Evangelist Don Wibier. In this session, we'll detail our newest products and features for ASP.NET Web Forms, MVC, ASP.NET Core, Bootstrap, and even a little Blazor at the end. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also send the link to the recording in a follow-up email. And we will do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. We do have members of the dev team online with us, so they will try and get to all of your questions as best they can. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Mehul and Don.
Thank you, Amanda. Welcome, everyone. And how are you doing today, Don?
I'm fine, Mehul. And I'm excited to talk about our new release.
Yeah, and there's a ton to show. So today, we're going to be talking about what's new in the upcoming release, version 19.1, and there's a lot to show, including our classic controls. So we'll start off with those, with the ASP.NET Web Forms and MVC line of controls, and then we'll jump into the new ASP.NET Core. Now, if you've remembered, our classic controls include, of course, our Web Forms and MVC, and I say classic because they've been around the longest, but we actually have two MVC line of controls. If you remember a couple of years ago, we took our excellent client-side controls, the DevExpress line of controls, and wrapped them, and so we actually have a second MVC line of controls as well, and we did the same thing for ASP.NET Core controls. So we're going to be talking about those as well, because those are also ASP.NET products. And of course, we'll be talking about Bootstrap Web Forms line of controls. And as Amanda mentioned, finally, we'll wrap up with a little talk about Blazor. And last week, we were at Build. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the news from Build as well, and what that means for us .NET developers. All right, Don, shall we just jump into it?
Sounds like a good plan.
Awesome. So today you'll see us use a mixture of all sorts of, as you can see, all sorts of browser tabs, images, and so forth. And the 19.1 beta is out. So you can, of course, go to your My Download section of DevExpress.com and download this stuff. And you're probably wondering, when's the actual release coming out? Within days, I would say. So stay tuned. Typically, as you know, during webinars week, we like to usually have it available. So what I will say is we'll start with the Web Forms controls, and a lot of this has been announced here, but there's some stuff we're going to talk about today that is not part of some of this items that you're going to see here. So let's just dive into it. So the very first thing is we've got a new Gantt control. Now, this Gantt control comes from our it's sort of based on an existing control. So what it is a control that was developed using an existing control. Now, we did this because it saved us not only time, but it helped us bring to market a solid control with some great feature sets. Now, Don, have you ever used a Gantt control?
Well, I haven't used one myself, but I have been speaking with lots of developers, and I have gotten questions about when you're going to release a Gantt control, and well, now I can absolutely answer that positively.
Yeah, you're right. It's been a highly requested feature, and I'm happy to say it's available now. Now, the reason we use the tree list is because a Gantt typically deals with hierarchical data sources. So the tree list control was perfect for this because it already can data bind to hierarchical sources. So the Gantt is actually made up, and it's a separate control. It's going to be a separate MVC control as well. And what it is it actually has a tree list area that displays the data items that you're connected to. And a Gantt control is great for displaying things like a project schedule that has tasks and items and so forth. And so it's made up of a tree list area and also the Gantt area that shows the timeline view. And this view is customizable, so it supports different, you can be very granular and say, I want to see the days, or I want to see the hours of a particular task. Or you can step back out and say, show me the months view, and I can see exactly what coming up. And then you can expand or collapse items. So it's a very nice control, gives you great control over what you're viewing and so forth. Now, I should mention, though, that the Gantt Control is right now available as a CTP. That means it's in preview mode because we're not quite done with it. But it, like I said, it has a lot of features, and we'd love for you to test it. So even though it's a preview, if you've been waiting for this, try it out. Just know, because it's a preview, we're not completely done with adding all the features, and you may find a couple of bugs. But mostly we want to hear your feedback so we can make it really great for the next major release when we do release it. So for the final release, I should say. So it's got time scales, as I mentioned, task progress, all that good stuff. So try it out. All right, Don, what else is happening for this release?
Well, one of the other things that we enhanced is our chart controls. And they were already looking fine, but what we introduced now is that you can use segment colorizers, and the example on the screen is a typical thing which probably shows it best. So we've got a chart with some temperatures here, and the hotter it gets, the more red the chart goes, and the colder it gets, it's getting blue in this case. So you can actually define color ranges for your chart depending on certain values, and it gives an excellent and nice impression on your chart. A couple of other things that we did here is, for instance, we introduced the center align axis, which is another feature which is shown on the screen.
Sure, Don. While you're talking, I'm just going to bring up the local demos as well. So, sorry, just keep going.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so the center align axis is obviously very useful if you have a chart which contains positive and negative values on both axes, and you want to have the X in the middle.
Sure, there you go.
Yeah, there you are. So together with the axis, the center align axis feature, we did a couple of things on, for instance, the label position and alignment on the axis. And for that, we have another demo coming up, which shows that you can actually, in this case, this is also one of the very nice things, you can actually resolve labels to none, and that's what you see on the left side. And that's also what is available in 18.2 and previous versions. But in 19.1 we have introduced another feature, which is shift in this case. So on the right chart you'll see that the labels are not overlapping here, and on the next picture you actually see that we did a couple of other things as well, because you can also hide one of the values here. So if you take a look at the left chart, then you'll see that there are a couple of labels overlapping, a couple of values, and because they're so close, you could actually say, well, you know what, I'm going to hide the other one because it's in that direction, and that will solve overlapping, and it looks nicer on the screen. One of the other things that we did is we have added a histogram function, and that is also pretty cool because now you can actually generate histograms, and we support aggregate functions there as well, together with Excel inspired histogram calculation modes. A couple of other things which are nice to mention there is that we have some interval information display with axis labels. You can obviously customize the label text, and you can use overflow and underflow for the bins. So yeah, some really nice additions on the charts.
Awesome, Don.
And I think, Mehul, that you need to talk about the grid view, and I have to say I thought that we had covered, but I was wrong here, because please show us what's coming up next.
Yeah, absolutely. So the excellent grid view has gotten updates in this release as well. Now, in the last 18.2 release, we did a lot of work on the grid view, which I'll talk about in just a second. But I'll start off with this adaptive feature. Now, as you know, we've been talking for the many years now, we've added responsive and adaptive features to the grid view. And in this release, I'm happy to say we've added also an adaptive toolbar. So as you can see, we've introduced this toolbar last year, and it's a nice toolbar because it looks like it's external, but it's actually not. And what's nice is that it gives you control. So it takes out some of those buttons and so forth and puts them in this toolbar at the top. So that's very nice. Now, we made it adaptive in this release. So if we take a look at the Chrome tools here, you can see that as I start losing screen real estate, keep an eye on the labels of the buttons here. So as I start going down, the labels disappear because it says, oh, I don't have enough screen real estate to display them, but I've still got the buttons, I've still got the functionality available to me. And as soon as I have enough real estate, the labels are updated as well. So it's a really excellent feature of the grid view that you can take advantage of today. Now, we've also added features to the batch editing. In the 18.2 release, we did a lot of work to the batch edit features done, and I'm happy to say that we've adapted it even more. So last year, we also introduced some new render modes for our button control, the ASPX button, and that was the danger, outline, secondary. Now, we already had link and native and so forth, but we introduced these because they're they're sort of Bootstrap inspired, as I say, because the Bootstrap uses the same name, danger, outline, and secondary, and so forth. But what's nice is that you can now use these three new modes for the command buttons. Now, you can't use, of course, these because they wouldn't make sense for command buttons in the grid view, but you can use them for the other modes. So let's say I come in here and I edit aniseed syrup to syrups or something like that, and you can see it marked it in that familiar color that we did last year and so forth. But what's nice is you can see these command buttons are now using that new render style. So that's really nice. And of course, you can change it to danger or secondary, but outline is the default, and outline just makes sense. Now, what's also nice is we've added endless paging to the batch edit mode. So this is big because before, when I would scroll down, I would have to use a pager to click on the page number. But here, as I scroll down, you can see automatically it just loads up the next set of items dynamically. So that's a great feature as well. And of course, we still have that excellent editing item. So for example, let's say we edited something on the first page, now on the second page, let's say I discontinue the tea time chocolate biscuits. And that's going to really hurt Julian because I know how much he loves his tea time chocolate biscuits. But as you can see, it is something that we can easily control right from whatever page. And you can see that regardless of the page I'm on or the changes that I make, you can see that my little preview that we introduced last year collects all of those. I can hit the save changes and they're instantly updated. So we've also added a new callback client-side event for end callback that you can obtain the command name from. So that's also there from this release. All right, Don, what else do we got going on in this release?
Well, since we're already talking about grids, let's mention a performance enhancements on the pivot grid. So in the previous version, we already announced and introduced a new in-memory processing data processing engine, but you had to turn that on by specifying an option there. And with the 19.1 release, we actually turned that feature on by default. So with 19.1, if you upgrade your project to 19.1, this new in-memory processing engine will be used by default, and that will give you a performance increase.
That is excellent. So just by upgrading to 19.1, the end users will get that benefit of this new engine. Oops,
yeah.
Looks like I failed that one. Awesome. All right, very cool, Don. Thank you. All right, let's now talk about the office controls. Now, I am showing the core, and we'll get to core in a minute, but first I wanted to talk that in the regular ASP.NET controls, for example, the rich text editor and the spreadsheet is what we call our Office controls, because they're, of course, inspired by Word and Excel, because you can't actually embed Word and Excel, but we know our end users love Office functionality, especially Excel, right? And all the time they're saying, give me that feature from Excel. In fact, this batch editing feature that I showed earlier was very much inspired by customer feedback that said, hey, we want to be able to have endless paging, just scroll down as I'm in batch edit mode and so forth. So again, we actually have controls that are specifically give you very Excel-like or Word-like features, the spreadsheet and rich text editor. And in this release, I'm happy to say we've added a couple of nice features. Now, over the years, these controls have gotten a lot of great features, but in this specific release, we've added a couple of features. Now, both controls, the rich text editor and the spreadsheet, have gotten a new feature called ClientSide Printing.
So, but what is the? Yeah, please explain it to me, man. Because client-side printing, if I print this document, it goes on my printer, so it's on the client already. So what's the deal with this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So it is interesting, because how does it print currently? Well, currently, you would, when you made a print request, it would make a call back to the server. It would prepare what's in the document using, of course, our server side. And we have great printing libraries, as you know, Don. But what client-side printing is, and it actually came from customer feedback, they said, we want to print what we see right here. So it's kind of like WYSIWYG. But what I've got laid out right now on the screen, I just want to print. And what's nice is the browsers support this functionality. So for example, when I hit print here, this is happening completely on the client side. So now it made a client side call out to the browser, and the browser is able to essentially print that. Now, using the browser, I can also save it as a PDF. So the difference here is that there's some caveats, as they say, to be aware of. First, not every browser is the same, so different browser engines may render things differently with the client-side printing option. With the server side, you can rest assured that it's going to the server and it's going to be the same. And also, there may be some issues with images and so forth. However, for certain customer scenarios, this works perfectly, because they said, I've got what I want on the screen and I just want to print it. So you now have this option with both the spreadsheet and with the rich text editor. Now, we've also supported a new option called culture specific format. And what this means is that when you are using the format cells dialog, so let's say I right click here on this and I say format cells, what allows me to do now is I can actually format the cells of this control. So let's use the local demo. And I've got actually the beta, so I probably have the same thing that everyone is using out there right now. And so if you've got the local beta installed here, for example, you can just bring up the formulas demo, and on it, let's say we add up the sum of, let's say, these columns here. So I've got these columns here, and I right click here and I say format cells, and in it, it wants me to connect that value. So let's do this one here, format this cell. It doesn't like this value here. But here, if I've got a date time or a currency format, you'll notice that you now have options to localize this to whatever culture-specific format you need. Whether it's in Georgian, it's French, whether it's Mohawk. I've never heard of Mohawk, but then again, I need to travel more. All right, so in essence, you have this option available to you. So both the date time and the currency now supports all these different locales built right into the dialog. So that's fantastic. All right, Don, speaking of rich text editor and the spreadsheet, our Office controls, let's just dive right into the ASP.NET controls. So as I mentioned, we've covered the classic controls. We got a lot to cover in the ASP.NET Core controls. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this at the end as well, but our ASP.NET Core controls are really growing. A lot of customers have seen over the years, look, WebForms and MVC fast controls, they're still huge, and a lot of customers have these for existing projects. I'm not sure how many customers are still using WebForms and MVC for new projects. It seems like a lot of customers are also seeing what they're seeing from the news from Microsoft, which is, Microsoft is really pushing in that core direction with a lot of things. So a lot of customers are doing things with File New with ASP.NET Core, and so that's why we made we took our DevExpress line of controls and wrapped them for ASP.NET Core because they're fully functional. There's over 60, 70 of them, and every time there's a DevExpress controller feature, that automatically gets added to ASP.NET Core as well. So ASP.NET Core is really growing. So let's just dive right into our ASP.NET line of controls, and we'll start with the excellent Office controls for it. So for the ASP.NET Core, we have we have available a couple of the same features that we just mentioned.
So what you're saying is that pretty much the features that we already have in the ASP.NET Core controls are pretty much the same as the ones that we have in the classic Web Forms and MVC controls as well.
Yes, exactly. Now, in last year, we took the big effort to bring these controls to ASP.NET Core. Now, as I mentioned, because we are taking our client-side controls and wrapping them for ASP.NET Core, and they work great that way because you got the best of both worlds. You got the server-side, Razor, and you got the client-side JavaScript and, client-side functional. I really like this approach. But what's nice about this is that we wanted to bring these powerful Office controls. Now, as you remember, Don, these are not small controls, right? I mean, they do a lot of things, so there's a lot of server-side functionality, which isn't always easy to bring to the client side. But last year, we took the effort and we brought SCTP, the rich text editor, and the spreadsheet to our ASP.NET Core controls. So that essentially involved our ASP.NET team putting a lot of that functionality client-side. So as difficult as it sounds, it wasn't so bad because a lot of the UI already did a lot of things on the client side. So I'm happy to say in this release, they're now out of CTP, out of preview, and they're available as fully supported controls. And it includes features like document importing, exporting, mail merge, native client-side printing, client-side API, autocorrect, all the great 99% of the features that it's available in the classic Office controls of the rich text editor and spreadsheet are available in the ASP.NET Core controls as well. So as you saw, cells, formulas, editing, worksheet protection, all that stuff. You can take a look, and it's fully available online now. So that's one thing I just wanted to mention out there for it. Now, what else is happening for .NET Core, Don? Hey, Don. Let's see. At this point, we'd probably talk about database. So I'm not sure if I can.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the charts.
Thanks.
That's one of the things that we did some nice additions on as well. And obviously, a couple of those features were already available in our ASP.NET controls. But for instance, you can now actually use annotations with your charts, and that means that you'll have labels, and you can actually format them as callouts, as you can see, with the nice arrows where they're coming from. And together with the annotations, we have done some enhancements on legends as well. So now you can actually use a callback method to change the order, the text, and the visibility of the legend items. And together with that, you can put in a couple of more titles, a couple of more things like a subtitle, etc. Another thing which is nice is you already saw that with the previous new features of the Web Forms controls is that we also have the resolve label overlapping. So again, you can have the chart reorganize the labels to not overlap each other. We have a couple of things like word wrap support, which is also a nice one. So for instance, if you have a chart with some longer series titles, and in this particular case you'll see the chart on 80.2, which looks like America, Europe is one country. With 19.1, you can actually now wrap those words. So North America sticks with North America and Europe sticks with Europe, which makes it a bit prettier to look at.
Well, that's really disappointing, Don, because I was really hoping to take a vacation over here at America, Europe, and now I have to call my travel agent and change my plans here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but we do have a very nice tool for that. It's called a plane, so
Nice.
you'll manage.
Awesome. All right, thanks very much. And so as you can see, feature parity is very important. So even in our ASP.NET Core, as Don just mentioned, these charts support a lot of those same great features that we brought to the classic controls. So whenever possible, we bring you the same feature parity as you come to expect from our controls. All right, Don, let's now talk about a new control that I think you will really like, and that is where did it go? It is a new file manager control for ASP.NET Core. And what's nice about this control is that it is CTP, but it is a lot like our server-side file manager control. So while this is loading up, what actually happened is that this was a highly requested feature, and you've heard in the past Don talk a lot about our other control and all the features that it supports and so forth. And he himself, before DevExpress, used to make a lot of CMSs, and he used to want this kind of control. And I think you made a custom one or something like that, right, Don, back in the day?
When I finished building my own file manager, like months after DevExpress released a file manager control, which was a bit of a waste of time for me, but I mean, I love the file manager control, and whatever project I do, there is some sort of file manager control involved. So yes, this is a really nice addition.
And what's nice is in this release, it is a CTP because we're not completely done with it, but it is available for ASP.NET Core, and it supports file and folder structure displays, file upload options, thumbnail and details view that you've come to expect. As you saw me, it's got that nice expanding and collapsing like the tree list. It's got REST API for file operations, right? So that's awesome. So it's got a lot of things. You can bind to a file system and all that great things. So it's available as a CTP, but I'd love for you to use it. Let us know what's wrong with it. Let us know how we can improve it. Let us know what features you need, because that's how we're going to make it better. So it's available now as a preview in this release. Okay, what's coming up next, Don?
Well, we've done quite a couple of nice additions on the UI widgets as well, and I think you can tell me something about actually a new widget.
Yeah. So we've got a new button. It's called a drop-down button. And this is a little bit different, and it looks a lot like an existing control. You might say, wait a minute, that looks like the select box. If you look in our editors, we got something called a select box that's very similar to this. But you'll notice that this is under the actions and lists and not under editors. And that's because this control doesn't actually edit anything. It doesn't edit a value. You can data bind, but it doesn't write back, right? So the difference here is that it can do certain things that the select box can't, and the select box can do things that this button can. So it's very specific in certain scenarios. For example, it's great. You can use it in a toolbar. You've got some items and so forth, and of course, as I mentioned, you can data bind it as well. So it's a new button for this release, and it's available, and it's called the drop-down button. Now, what else do we've got, Don?
One of the other controls that we actually recently introduced is our HTML/Markdown Editor, and it's already a very nice control, but we've done a couple of enhancements here as well. So for instance, you're now able to select an image or a video block which is in your content, and you can resize that any way that you like. And another thing which is quite popular these days is the support for so-called mentions. And what's that? Well, whenever you type some text in the editor and you start with the @ sign, that will trigger a special command in the editor, and it will show a pop-up with items that you can place behind the @ sign. Most typical, that would be a list of users, but you can actually customize it any way you want, and you can now have that mention support in your editor as well.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, I think we should also mention our other new item. We've got a floating button widget, Don. Now,
Oh yeah, that's a cool one.
that is a cool one. You know why? It's like my favorite button, right? Because look, it's floating. That means it's flying. It's got the word action in it, right? And it looks kind of cool. So, but all joking aside, it is really cool. And if you've used something like Google Calendar, you'll know that this was inspired from the Google Material Design Guidelines. And so last year, you saw we initially added it to the scheduler, which makes a lot of sense because, you know, a lot of people always ask us to add either Outlook Calendar or Google Calendar type of functionality. And this one makes a lot of sense because it's a button that basically floats, and you can position different areas. You know, here we've got it to the right. And so what's nice is now that it's a separate control, you can combine it. So here we've got it combined with the grid view, and when I click on it, you can see that I've got it connected with a particular action, but you can actually have it pop up certain menu items, contextual items for rows or something like that. So for example, now that I've got a row selected here, you can see it says, do you want to add, edit, and so forth. And when I have nothing selected from earlier, you can saw that it just brings up a regular menu item. So again, it's a really cool button that you can take advantage of, and we follow the excellent Google Material Design Guidelines as we do for other things when we are inspired by something. All right, what else do we have happening here, Don?
Well, I think we can also mention that we have a really nice new theme for our controls, and maybe you can show something about it.
You know what? That's a great point. Speaking of material design and Google, last year we actually introduced, and you might be saying, Mehul, that says DevExtreme, that's not ASP.NET Core. And as I mentioned, we actually take the DevExtreme line of controls for ASP.NET Core. So whatever comes from DevExtreme, we're able to easily bring for ASP.NET Core as well. So I'm just going to reference this because it is a easy way to show that essentially the material design themes for ASP.NET Core were great, but they've got a lot of padding and so forth. That's great for mobile. It's not great for desktop. So essentially, we took all of those themes and made a compact version called the Compact Material Design Themes. And there's the same corollaries for the lime and this green and all so forth. All of these blue, purple, teal, orange, light and dark. There's compact versions of those as well. So those are now available in this release as well. And let's talk a little bit about the data grid and tree list, Don. So in this release for ASP.NET Core, we have also some enhancements to the data grid and tree list. So let's bring up that demo back here and take a look. And as you remember, we talked a lot about batch editing. So in this release for ASP.NET Core, we've got some enhancements for batch editing as well. And in this release, well, I should say keyboard navigation enhancements, really. And so I've got a whole long blog post about it. But what's nice is this all came from customer feedback. And the customer feedback said, look, we actually have some high-speed data entry scenarios. Customers said, we've got users doing really fast data editing in the grid view, and we want you to make it faster. So for example, we've added a feature that lets you start editing right from a key press. So here, as soon as I started typing, it started putting me into edit mode right away. The second is we've got configurable key actions. So for example, on a particular key action, I can either start edit or I can move the focus, right? And we also give you configurable key direction. So on the enter key, I can say, look, either go to the next column, the next row, or do nothing. So all of these was right from customers telling us this is what's going to help our users work faster in the grid view. And this is now available for ASP.NET Core, and you can start using it today. Now, we've also added accessibility enhancements. So So you can now navigate to and interact with the data grid and tree list UI elements like the headers, pager controls, and the command column using the keyboard. And if you're not aware, accessibility affects at least a third of the population, meaning that they may be blind or disabled, but basically, many users are using the web using screen readers like JAWS and so forth. So this is a welcome feature for our customers, and it's a very important feature for certain organizations. So I'm happy to say that we take it seriously with a lot of our web controls, and I'm happy to say this is available. Now, along with adding these features, I'll simply add that we've added some new API things for data editing, some new events as well that you can take advantage of and see in our What's New. And speaking of that, Don, I've got a couple of more features I just want to mention for ASP.NET Core, and that is the not for ASP.NET Core, but for the data grid and tree list, and that is the tree list has a new filter mode, and this filter mode essentially it kind of fixes a problem and introduces a new feature, which is that previously when you would filter and you'd find, let's say, the row, it looked like, well, that's it. The shipping manager had no children items to expand on. Well, turns out it did. We just didn't show them. And that was because we were only showing with ancestors, meaning the parent items. But now you can see the full branch, and you can either, and what's nice, you can control it, because some customers want this, some customers don't. Well, what's nice is that you can fully control this filter mode now. Now, one last thing is for the data grid, we've added new Export to Excel API, and it is in preview mode, but it gives you a richer way to export, a more flexible API based on the Excel.js library. And so basically, the features include the ability to add a custom header and footer, export multiple grids, as well as export multiple grids to a single document, rename the exported file, generate worksheets, etc., etc. There's a lot of great features. Please try them out, even though it's in preview mode, because what's nice is this feature can be used with the existing Export to Excel API, so it won't break anything, and you can or it can be tested independently. So it's a really nice feature that you can take advantage of today. All right, Don, what else do we got happening in this release for our core controls?
Well, we have a couple of improvements on the reporting. I think the most important one is the support of the rich text box. But we're not going to spend too much time on the reporting section because we have a great webinar coming up this week, a What's New webinar on dashboards, reporting, and so on with Julian and Paul. And they're going to be all over the reporting features there. So if you want to know what's going on with the reporting, please register yourself for May 16th, and you'll get all the ins and outs on the dashboards, reporting, and data analytics. One of the other things that we have done is something really nice on the pivot grid. The pivot grid, we have implemented some remote data paging. So you can actually now deliver, if your endpoint supports it, you can deliver chunks of data, which makes working with large volumes of aggregated data a bit more performant. And another visual thing that we have implemented is cascade filtering, which is also really nice. So suppose you have like a pivot grid which has some selections, in this case on countries and cities. What's happening now, or in this case we have some products. In case you now select the bikes on the left box, then automatically all the subcategories are being filtered out which do not relate to bikes. So this is just a very nice visual enhancement. And the same goes for the third one in this case. So if you select the bike, it will also filter out the mountain bikes, the road bikes, and touring bikes. So a very nice feature here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the cascading thing because it guides the users, and it's a really awesome feature.
Well, yeah, and you might be aware that if you need to do this manually as a developer, it's quite a bit of work to filter out those boxes dynamically, and you have to fumble around with some code here and there, and now it's out of the box. So that's just very nice that it's included out of the box now.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think we also have something to mention about our Visual Studio integration. Maybe you can tell some more about that.
Yeah, great point. So we actually earlier this year, I don't know if you remember, but we actually released an excellent uh, project template, but it was for the classic controls. But it was responsive and it had a lot of cool things, and I did a whole webinar on it. And the feedback on it was, hey, this is great, but what about ASP.NET Core? Well, as I mentioned, ASP.NET Core is based on the DevExtreme line of controls, so we couldn't just take the classic controls, that it's crossing the streams. You can't do that. So what the team did said, listen, we actually have a great responsive project template already, and it's actually based on our DevExtreme Angular template. So what the team did was they said, well, we can actually make this available for ASP.NET Core as well. And so they've done it for 19.1. It's available in Visual Studio. You can start using it today. So you'll find it if you just search for DevExtreme, and if you've got 2019 installed, you've got that. Either you love it or hate it, but it's got that new file new dialog. And in it, you can just type DevExtreme, and you'll find, if you've got our beta installed, the responsive ASP.NET Core application, if you have 19.1 installed, basically. So what's nice is as soon as you run it, the file new experience gives you a full application. And what's great is we built this using best practices. So as I said, it's built with ASP.NET Core 2.1 with support for Razor pages. It uses our ASP.NET Core controls so you can see how they're data bound, how to set up features. And it's got support for the color swatches. So I've got dark on one side, I've got light on the other. So you can see exactly how we're doing it as well. And it's fully compatible with our design time, Web API, and Razor scaffolding wizards, which allow you to basically right-click in Visual Studio and say, hey, I want to add a grid now data bound to my Web API, so forth. So really helpful, really powerful, and you can start using it today. And I'd love for you to try it. And again, provide the feedback. Let us know what's happening, because we get a lot of customers asking, yes, I need the responsive features, but I just need a way to get started. So like I said, we've integrated our excellent drawer component and so forth, and it gives you all these features like the hamburger menu, resizing, hiding, all that good stuff. All right, Don, should we talk a little bit about the scheduler?
Yeah, that is also a very, very nice control. And specifically in 19.1, we have made some very nice UX enhancements concerning smaller devices. So if you want to have this calendar on your mobile phone, that's going to be great. Because what we did is we actually, specifically if you're on the month view, for instance, you'll see on the screen that...
Let me bring up the demo, and I think the best way to show this was actually with the DevExtreme version of the demo, because, as I mentioned, because we wrap them, the same functionality is available there. So, as you can see, ASP.NET Core, same thing is available there. So the reason I want to show this is because, I just like the way this laid out. So
yeah, this makes more sense. Yeah, and well, the nice thing is if you're looking in the month view, there is obviously not enough space to display all the appointments. So we'll place the dots on the days where there is an appointment, and once you click on the dot or you touch it, you'll have this drawer popping at the bottom of the screen, which will show you all the exact appointments, and you can actually edit or delete them or check the details of the appointments. So a very nice feature. And yeah, once you tap again on one of those drawer items, you will actually go into the editing mode, and in this case you can create a new one as well. So very nice on a smaller screen.
Excellent. All right, and I think we have one more item to mention, and that is the new diagram control. Now,
Oh
this
yeah.
was also a highly requested feature that came from customer feedback. And again, we don't refuse items just because we don't like them. We want to make sure we do it right. And I believe this diagram control is excellent. So as you can see, we've got support for several shapes, and yes, you can, drag and drop them, and you can see that resizing is available. And what's nice is that this is now available, and yes, it's in preview mode, but you can see that it supports data binding, custom shapes, so it does quite a bit for even in the preview mode. And I'd love for you to test this as well. I mean, this is a huge release with several new controls that you can just play around with. And these are things that you've been asking for. And again, don't let sometimes we get customers that are like, I'm just going to wait until it's actually fully released. And that's fair. But if you have a customer scenario, and if it's possible that you've got some way to test it without affecting, your production servers, or if you're okay with putting it on a custom view on a production server, again, we'd love to know what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Are we missing a shape? Is it not working the way you expected it? Did it crash somehow when you just did something simple? We gotta really hear that feedback. We want that feedback. We want to make it better. So please check out the diagram control, and let's move on, Don.
Yeah, let's. I think this covers pretty much everything about ASP.NET Core controls. So let's go to the Bootstrap controls and see what we've done over there.
All right, we will fly through this real quick because it's already 10:49, and Amanda likes to give us the people watching, attendees, enough time to ask questions. So let's just fly through this. What do we got for Web Forms? Our Bootstrap Web Forms line of controls.
Yeah, well, I think the first control we're going to show is a new editor, and to be precisely, it's a new color editor. It supports all the things that you could expect from the editor. So you'll have like a collection of colors, or you can actually use custom colors as well. So here you see a collection of fixed colors, but you can actually turn on a feature where it will have the customize color button with the already known color selector here. So a small but very useful control. Mehul, and what do we have on the grid view?
As I mentioned about feature parity before, we actually have the adaptive toolbar that I mentioned earlier. This one works a little different because it's Bootstrap, and we're using the Bootstrap engine for some of those responsive features. But keep an eye on this toolbar here, and you'll see, actually, let's show this one here. So keep an eye on this toolbar here, and you'll see that as I adapt it, it moves up. Sorry about that. But you can see that not only do I get this little button where some of the buttons that can't be placed is moved to, and you can control the hierarchy of which ones first get hidden and so forth. But also, as we keep going, sorry about that here, you'll see that the toolbar keeps adapting, and now it's hidden the text. And it says, okay, I've got just enough for the icons, which is plenty for a small mobile screen. And as we go further along, we can see that the adaptive toolbar comes back and brings back all of the text and then all of the buttons once we have enough real estate. So, excellent feature. And that feature I mentioned earlier about batch editing, well, last year we did a lot of work to bring that screen that I showed earlier. So when I start editing this Andrew and call it Andrew 1 or something like that, you can see this feature and this preview screen was all added last year to the classic controls, and it generally takes us maybe a release then to bring it to the Bootstrap line of control. So I'm happy to say that it's also available now here, and that my favorite button, Don, it's back. It's that floating action button, and you can also incorporate that into our Bootstrap grid view as well. All right, so callback support is available in batch edit mode as well, and the the new floating action button is there as well. What about the rich text editor, Don? Do we got anything happening there?
Well, I think the most important thing to mention here, and this also is concerning feature parity between the different platforms, that we also support client-side printing on this rich editor as well.
That's right. You're totally right. It blanks my mind because there's so many ASP.NET controls these days. Okay,
absolutely.
So rich text editor totally supports that feature Don just mentioned. You'll find it under the File tab. And Scheduler. So let's quickly mention the Scheduler also has the same enhancement that Don mentioned earlier, which was the date highlighting. But beyond that, we've done a little bit of work where we changed the date navigator. So previously, this date used to be inside here, and we pulled it out here. So now it makes a little more sense because now when I do this drop down, I also get date highlighting in the navigator. So those dates that have appointments can be easily shown, those items. So they seem kind of like minor enhancements, but I think they're really useful. It's always the little things, the little touches that make the difference. All right, Don, let's just jump into and talk about the new kid on the block, the one that everybody's excited about, and that is our new offering for Blazor. Now, have you heard of Blazor, Don?
Oh yeah, I have, and I'm totally happy that we already have a set of Blazor components.
And that's okay. So if you're not aware of Blazor, let me just quickly tell you what it is. And it's a new technology from Microsoft, and they've been working on it for now about a year now. Earlier this year, we started supporting it because last year when Microsoft first announced it, it was very much an experimental thing, and it seemed like a good idea. And what it is, and I have a whole blog post that I've written about it that dives into it, has references to the whole Microsoft stack of things. But essentially, it is a way to build rich interactive client-side web UI using .NET. Essentially, it means that you don't have to write JavaScript to create a client-side UI. It doesn't mean that you can totally avoid JavaScript, because it still has a feature for JavaScript interop, but largely it can do this. Now, it can do this because it's using a technology in the browser that's now supported by most major browsers, and that's WebAssembly. Now, if all of this sounds foreign, that's okay. Don't worry. I highly recommend that you join us for this upcoming webinar in June. In less than a month, we are doing a webinar with the Microsoft PM for Blazor, the very cordial Dan Roth, and he's going to join us. He's going to tell you the fundamentals and discuss client versus server, tell the roadmap for Blazor. He's even going to show you how to build a simple Blazor app. So this is all stuff that you can actually see today. A lot of this is shown from like the build, and he's been talking about being that Blazor is the thing he works on all day long. He's can show you the ins and outs of it. But what's nice with him, and I think the true value is, we're going to make a lot of time available, so he'll stick around and join in talk Q&A, so you can ask him what's happening, what their plans are, any questions and concerns about Blazor and what it means for the future of ASP.NET, all that kind of good stuff. And of course, I'll be there to show our line of Blazor controls, which includes and yes, it says 7 here. Don't worry, we're going to get this page updated. But as of last week, we actually released a new preview 5 for Blazor. In fact, now in this preview, we actually have I say preview 5, but literally minutes ago, we just released preview 6. But preview 6 is actually a hotfix, so don't get too excited. But what's nice is that the latest preview of our Blazor controls works both for the client and server-side hosting models. And what that means is, and it's too deep to get into in this webinar, but Blazor can run completely client-side, as I mentioned, but also there's a server-side model as well. But our controls work for both models, and that's fantastic. And for this, we offer 9 major controls, including grid, pivot grid, editors, and then, of course, in this preview last week, we introduced the excellent layout component as well as the tabs component. So you can read all about this. I'm super excited about it. I can't wait for you to join me on this webinar so I can hear all your feedback about it. So far, the feedback has been fantastic. Folks are loving all the stuff for it. I would love for you to just help us figure out, by giving us your feedback. Why Blazor over Angular React or something like that? Which model is better for you? Have you used it already? What kind of apps are you developing? Any and all thoughts and feedback really helps us. Is there a control you're looking for in Blazor? Now, finally, Don, last week we went to Build conference, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if you heard the news, but I have to mention this, and that is there was some news last week, and my buddy Scott here, Hunter, really excellent person who runs the great .NET team over there at Microsoft, published this post, and it had some developers a little bit concerned because in it he says, listen, after .NET Core 3, we will no longer port any more features from the .NET framework. So in essence, they are targeting September 2019 to release .NET Core 3. And after that, they will no longer port features from the .NET framework. So what that means is they're very much forward-thinking, right? They are saying, look, and this is just based on customer scenarios. It doesn't mean that anything is dying, right? Because they see the same things that we do, and that is that many customers have a lot of things. WebForms is very popular. MVC is still very popular, and they're going to still support those, but they will be supported in the .NET framework, full framework. And what they're really trying to get to in the future, and they've talked about this, and if you Google, let's say, .NET Core 5 or 1.NET, they've talked about this. You can look at the build talks and all that. That's not what we're here to address. What we're here to address is you can rest assured we have your back. As you saw from this webinar, we have so many line of controls for the web, not just the server-side stuff that you saw today, but, and again, I'll be showing this stuff on Friday for the Angular React stuff, right? So we have so many line of controls available that you absolutely want to see that we've got your back covered, right? So whatever the Microsoft strategy is, rest assured we'll be there to support it. And I would not get too concerned about these things because Microsoft is simply saying, and it's their job to make these frameworks. It's their job to be forward-thinking. And, it's no surprise the last couple of years they've not focused as much on the classic technologies like WebForms and so forth. They're very much focused on things like improving .NET Core and stuff, right? As you saw last year, they focused in on bringing WinForms to .NET Core, and they're still working on it, right? Our team was working actively with Microsoft as they're trying to get designer support for WinForms and all that stuff. So again, you can hear Julian and Paul talk about some of this stuff as well from the WinForms webinar yesterday. Rest assured, for the web, we're fully committed. We got things for WebForms. We got things for ASP.NET Core. We've got things in the works for Blazor as well. So keep an eye on our newsletters. Sign up for these webinars. All right. With that said, let's see if I know it's already 11, but maybe we have time for one or two questions if anybody wants to stick around and we can help answer those.
Hey, Mehul. Hey, Don.
Hey,
Amanda.
I don't know if you can see questions, but the team has done a bang-up job. They've gone through almost all of them. A couple just popped up.
Awesome. So I am looking at the chat one. I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay, so they demonstrated overlapping label in charts. Yes, we did, Richard. You can see that. Somebody wants more info comparing tutorials, different ways to do things. Hey, Paul, that's a great question. There is nothing readily available, and here's why. The frameworks are so different, and really it comes down to the first question you want to ask yourself is, do I want server-side or do I want client-side for the web? When you can answer that question, you can say, okay, I want either DevExpress's ASP.NET offering or I want their client-side offering with DevExtreme. And so I would say start with the general question, and then we can help guide you towards which specific control library would work best for you. So feel free, as you can see, here's my email, here's our Twitter, contact us, right? In fact, just email me and I can help you figure out something, and we can go from there. But it's a very broad question, not easily we can answer that here. All right, I was told last year that Bootstrap offering was going to be supported, but no new features were to be added. Has that changed? I don't know if, I don't know. Oh, I think, Jonathan, you're probably referring to, so last year, we kind of rushed to market a Bootstrap line of controls for Core, and we stepped back and we said, well, you know what, our ASP.NET Core offering is not the best with having the Dev Extreme version of ASP.NET Core and the Bootstrap Core, so we said, okay, we're not going to continue with the Bootstrap Core because we just rushed it a little bit too much. We were actually going to make it a CTP, and so then we decided and we stepped back and said this is the best strategy. So I think maybe that's what you might have been told about this, but our Bootstrap Web Form line of controls are supported. They do have new features added to them, right? So that's not going away. And if you're concerned about Bootstrap support from our current ASP.NET Core line of controls, they do support Bootstrap, not in the same way, but you can import in any Bootstrap theme, and our themes can adapt to them as well, meaning that you can actually take those fonts and colors from Bootstrap, and we have a theme builder and all that good stuff for it. So if there's, again, questions about it, contact us and we'll help you with that. Somebody's heavily into the framework system has grown over the years. Do you think .NET Core is the future? Yes, Anthony, .NET Core is the future. I'm not saying this. This isn't news. It's the future in that that's what Microsoft is focused in on, right? Now, whether I don't have a crystal ball, I never try to estimate what the future could be. You know, it's like trying to predict stocks. Nobody can really do it. But what I can tell you is you look at what a company invests in, and Microsoft is heavily interested in .NET Core, not just as they feel this is the future, but they have a strategy overall as a company with the Azure. They make tons of money with Azure, right? They're very much into supporting Azure, but they're also very much into supporting developers. They want to be very inclusive, and they want the Python developer to come in and start maybe using .NET Core. And they said, hey, when we talk to all sorts of different developers, and they said even the Python devs who don't like JavaScript were interested in Blazor, right? So they're very interested in technologies and bringing in the developers onto their stack. So do I think it's the future? Absolutely. Whether or not it'll still be around in 10 years, who knows, right? Will there be another technology? Will they innovate more on web forms again? I don't know. I can only tell you what their current focus is, and it looks like very much it's headed toward .NET Core, and it has been pretty much for the last few years. I don't think that's anything shocking that I'm saying there. That said, I'm not saying web forms is gone. Web forms is still huge for us. Microsoft knows how big it is even for them. They see the same telemetry information we do, which is it's big for our customers. And therefore, we still actively support it. We get tons of questions about it. We still innovate on it. Earlier this year, I put out that webinar about a responsive project template for our ASP.NET Web Forms controls. So if you want to develop a file in your project, have at it. Why not, right? A lot of times, as developers, they want to have the latest relevant technologies. And so it's always good to have some core things in your belt as well. Again, the choice is yours, really. It depends on what your team skill set is and all that. All right, will there be upgrade wizards to migrate projects from versions to new ones? Pierre, for the most part of his question was total, and he capitalized total, backwards compatibility. Pierre, if I could make any of our devs have complete 100% backwards compatibility, heck, Julian, myself, we would love that. But again, it's, I think it's impossible. As you go forward in life, you're going to have breaking changes, so we can't avoid them. We try our darndest. We try
Absolutely.
so hard We try so hard. We have groups, we have reviews, we have people going, do you really have to do this? And a lot of times they'll say, well, in order to take advantage of this new .NET Framework feature, we kind of have to do this other breaking change, but it's worth it for this reason. So we always have those conversations. We try our best. And I apologize, but once in a while we will have some breaking changes, or we may break backwards compatibility only when it makes sense. All right, as far as upgrade wizards, yes, there's a project converter, but that just changes references. If you want to take advantage of new API and so forth, that is up to you. That's something you have to kind of start writing code for yourself. There's still questions. Richard, email Don about any questions you have about the overlapping labels. He can totally help answer any of those questions. Blazor Suite is based on DevExtreme widgets. No, Dietmar. Dietmar asked a great question. Is your Blazor Suite based on the DevExtreme widgets? I'm going to write a blog post about this. It is not. It's actually completely new line of controls we're writing. They are influenced by the rendering of the Bootstrap controls. And again, in the blog post, I'll kind of talk more about this, but they are not based on the DevExtreme widgets. Because, again, if you think about what Blazor is .NET C# based controls, right? And yes, they render client-side, but then again, if you look at even our classic controls, our classic grid view, it has so many client-side API, so many client-side features. Yes, it's a server-side control, but these days, the mix between server-side, client-side is becoming, much more clear, meaning that we want a lot of client-side features, but there are some things that are just better left done on the server side. And we know this, for example, that ASP.NET Core spreadsheet control has a lot of client-side features, but a lot of features that are, intensive, you don't want to put those on the browser, on the client side, and sometimes it just makes sense. Okay. With that said, I'm going to stop. I would love to talk all day long. Feel free to contact me. I love these kind of conversations. I love to hear from you. So feel free to contact me either on Twitter, on email. Same for Don. And with that, I'll say thank you and hand it back to you, Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you, Mehul, and thank you, Don. All right, everybody. Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will be available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. You will also get a follow-up email from us with links to all of our launch webinar recordings. And we do have more launch webinars coming up this week on WPF, Dashboards, Reporting and Analytics, DevExtreme, and CodeRush. You can register now at devexpress.com/webinars. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Mehul and Don. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.